What is the most unorthodox way you know that a couple has met and fallen in love? We knew each other only a little bit through friends. I was badly injured in an industrial accident. I needed time to heal. I lived alone, and it was dangerous for me not to have someone who could check on me periodically. She happened to be recovering from my surgery and wasn't able to her job or drive for a couple weeks and offered me her guest bedroom until I could safely go home. I think it felt safe for her to make the offer. I was pretty much completely incapacitated and barely ambulatory. We had an amazing 25 years before she died. I'll always love her. I only heard this from a friend, but I find it hilarious. My friend went to a house party with this dude. This dude decided to wear his Pikachu costume to the party, although it wasn't a costume party. Then he met her at the party. She also wears her Pikachu costume. I met them once. They were super funny. They are married. End of story. One of my cousins fell in love with my other cousin's mail-order bride. The feelings were mutual. So we had a wedding and one very unhappy cousin. My grandparents told me about a woman who met her fiancé's cousin during the rehearsal dinner night before the wedding. Everyone noticed they spent an inordinate amount of time chatting that night, but no one thought anything of it. The cousin went to talk to the bride just before the wedding and the two of them left together. They've been married 62 years, very dark, but parents met while investigating a rape. My dad was a police officer and my mom worked for a rape crisis center. My great-aunt went to Paris to study art in the 1950s, sunk into a depression, and went out to throw herself into the Seine. Along came a Frenchman who was fresh out of the Foreign Legion. He talked her off the bridge, talked his way into her heart, pants, and they both moved to Sweden together and lived happily painting together for about 40 years. My brother and I took our 3-year-old niece to a toy store. I needed to pick something up for a baby shower, and my bro was flying a small plastic Incredible Hulk drone that was on display, just to keep my niece entertained. The drone got tangled in this random girl's long flowing locks. My brother tried to help her get it out. He made it worse. The girl was getting pissed, and that was before my impatient niece got a hold of the controller and tried to make the drone fly while it was still tangled in the girl's hair. Somehow, out of this, my brother managed to get this girl's number, a date, and now they're married and about to give me another niece. When my nephew was in college, they had a snow day and they canceled classes. The students decided to put on a mock wedding just for fun and they picked 2 students to get married. My nephew and a girl were chosen. A few years later, they did it again, for real. My parents, back in the 70s, met whilst being pen pals from a certain UK newspaper. My dad was in the forces, and they basically fell in love over the course of writing letters to one another. They got married whilst only having met in person a few times, and the marriage lasted almost 30 years until his death at a relatively young age, 52. A guy studied to become a priest and a girl studied to become a nun. They met, dropped out, and yes, they got married. My dad was a young Catholic priest and my mom volunteered at his parish helping bring food and meds etc. to elderly shut-ins. They met and fell in love. As a direct result of this, my dad was sent by the bishop to Lima, Peru to physically, as in construction work, build a school and do some soul searching. My dad soul searched and helped build a school. He came back and told the bishop that he no longer wanted to be a priest and wanted to marry my mom. The bishop gave them his blessing and personally married them in the cathedral. I am named after the bishop. So my siblings, my mother and I are all grateful that Dad chose us over his marriage to God. Maybe this isn't the best story, but it's the story I've got. Edit for clarity, my dad was encouraged by the bishop to volunteer with Mary Noel, https://marynoel.org for a period of time. My dad, as an upperclassman, was an RA of a college dorm. My mom was dating one of the residents of his floor. My dad took a shining to her. The end of the school year comes, my mom breaks up with her boyfriend. Early summer, my dad calls her up to ask her to be his date to a friend's wedding. Turns out my dad shares a first and last name with a guy from my mom's hometown who is not a good person. She thinks it's hometown guy and declines. My dad persists and calls her back, and the misunderstanding is straightened out. It turns out my mom was going to be attending that same wedding anyways, as her cousin is the groom. They go to the wedding together and would be married 50 years next summer. Dad passed away a few years ago. My college roommate Jeremy saw a ridiculously beautiful woman in Target Pharmacy area senior year in high school. He walked up to her and matter-of-factly said, "So you do drugs, huh?" They've been married 15 years with a few kids. Edit. He was a senior in college, not high school lol. My sister swiped the side of a guy's brand new car. She said he got out of his car, stormed over in a rage, and had a comical change of expression demeanor as soon as he got a look at her. They've been together 3 years. Also, I'm too good a driver, that's my problem. This one is tricky, so I'll do my best to explain it clearly. My maternal uncle dated his younger sister's close friend after college. She was lovely and kind, but they mutually broke up when he decided to become a priest and she decided to teach overseas. He flunked out of seminary school and married someone else, who became my aunt. My mom, that uncle's sister, married a guy, my dad. They had 2 kids, one of them was me. Mom died when I was 6. Dad kept in touch, of course, with my uncle and aunt. Lovely woman who had dated my uncle and later left to teach overseas got married to a guy, got pregnant, and he panicked and bailed. So she came back to the US to have her baby and divorce the bastard. Which she did. So, widower dad with 2 kids, one of them me, abandoned divorced mom with 1 kid, lady who dated my uncle and went overseas. Uncle and aunt decide, hey, those 2 might hit it off. Set up a dinner. They got married a year later. Boom. New family that worked out well. Stepmom passed away about 10 years ago. But I always thanked my aunt and uncle for setting up my dad with my future stepmom. And, every once in a while, as all of us cousins are going through our family photos, we find photos of my mom with my stepmom when they were friends. It's neat but kind of weird. TLDR, Uncle set up my dad with uncle's ex-girlfriend/his sister's former BFF. Marriage ensues. Fortune teller, the mists are clearing. You are going to meet a handsome stranger. I sense that he is a kind, caring man. The spirits say he has a well-paid job, he installs air conditioning. You know, this sounds a lot like my son. I'll give you his number. They are still together, with kids, 20 years later. And people think that fortune-telling is a scam. I read a memoir of a Holocaust survivor, Magda Hellinger, who met her husband in Auschwitz. Apparently a drunk German guard who knew her by sight told her to come over one day. He started asking her weird, uncomfortable questions like, "Are you married? Do you have a boyfriend?" And she says something like, No, I don't have time, I'm not really that pretty, etc. She of course wants to get away from the situation as fast as possible. But the German soldier is like, "What? No, we must find you a boyfriend. What about that man?" And points to a random Jewish prisoner who is walking by. The drunk guard tells the man to come over and essentially starts organizing a date for them. She pretends to agree but never shows up for the date. But somehow she and this Jewish man end up talking and fall in love. They both survived the camp and got married, started a family and lived the rest of their life happily together. TL, Doctor. A hammered German guard decides to play matchmaker to two Jewish prisoners of Auschwitz, and they fall in love and live happily ever after. I met my husband on a bus tour of Scotland, where we got chatting and sparks flew straight away. We had a whirlwind romance over 3 days amongst castles, glens and icy highland streams. We swam in Loch Ness, drank whiskey and learned about tartan together before the trip was over and he had to fly home more than 5,000 miles away. Friends and family didn't think it would work, and neither did we. We were in a long-distance relationship between Los Angeles and Edinburgh for nearly 3 years with an over 5,000-mile commute to see each other until we got married. But we agreed at the start, we'd stay together until the relationship stopped being fun. We now live together in Scotland with our daughter, and the Skype ringtone still gives me flashbacks. We're still having fun. My high school chemistry teacher took her husband square dancing, and they met another couple there. They decided they liked each other's respective partners more than their spouse, so both couples got divorced and remarried. The four of them still meet up to go square dancing. Not my story, but someone posted on here about how their parents met. Before his dad met his mom, he had a long-term very serious GF he was on the verge of proposing to. The two of them were supposed to see the Back to the Future sequel together the night it came out. But the dad had a family emergency, his grandfather had a stroke or something. He asked his GF to hold off on seeing it until they could go together. She reluctantly agreed. He later found out she had gone with a male classmate she was friendly with, and who he did not like at all. He was pissed. The girl said it was selfish of him to expect her to wait just because he had to. She offered to go see it again with him, but he said he'd rather go on his own. At this point the dad was upset, but he fully expected he and his GF would move past this. Then he went to the movie and met Op's mom. It was love at first sight and the GF was history. I'm oddly fond of the story.